The point is, if we don't get into that vulnerable state with each other, trust does not emerge. And if trust does not emerge, then all of the benefits of trust will very likely not emerge. And I'll get to those specific benefits in a moment. Here's the answer. The reason why Sarah will become vulnerable with Dominic, as Dominic will become vulnerable with Sarah, is the moment at which, or during the process during which, the following three principles are expressed through behaviors. So here they are. What are the expected behaviors? What Sarah has been looking for in Dominic, now I'm being literal. Ever since you laid eyes on me, Sarah, and heard me speaking, the way I speak, the way I hold myself, if you snooped around on the internet or whatever the case is, the first thing that brain I mentioned earlier and that second brain I mentioned earlier have been looking for ever since we collectively shuffled off the African continent is firstly, Sarah's asking herself implicitly or explicitly, is Dominic good? Does he have integrity? And is that demonstrated? Does he waffle on about being good, or does he demonstrate his goodness through actual actions, grounded in values that we share? Secondly, Sarah has been trying to figure out implicitly or explicitly, am I benevolent? Or am I yet, as I said earlier, another flipping twit with thick-rimmed glasses, tassels on his wrists, clicking through yet another webinar, trying to sell some sort of hack? Or am I here sincerely for Ross, for Shabine, for Alex, for Daniel, and for Sarah, and also for their ecosystems? And I might know something about their ecosystems, not because of the introduction of the call only, but because of the nature of this community that has caused me to very gratefully share an hour or two of my life with this community. Does that indicate that I'm interested in their world? So Sarah wants to know, am I benevolent or considerate? The third thing Sarah wants to know, and I'm repeating this on purpose, either implicitly or explicitly, is whether I'm capable. Do I know what the heck I'm talking about? Have I put these tools I'm about to share with you to practice? Or is Alex, like I've just got Alex out of a tough spot last night. He was scratching his head as to what the heck he was going to do. I was flipping burgers until 8 o'clock last night. He sent me a desperate WhatsApp. I downloaded the stuff I'm showing to you now. I'm a trust expert, right? Or do I have substance? The degree to which I can satisfy all three of those characteristics, perceived characteristics in me and in reality with Sarah, is the degree to which I, in Sarah's mind, will be trustworthy. And so the degree to which every one of us on this call can satisfy that within a team members of each other, team members of a so-called leader, organization, customers, organizations with their whole ecosystem of stakeholders, the degree to which those three elements can be satisfied and demonstrated is the degree to which trustworthiness in any bounded system can be established. But there's something else that is incredibly important, and this is where often a lot of the work happens. Even though I may be trustworthy, 10 out of 10 for all three of those things, fantastic. If Sarah has an issue with South African accents, or she reminds me of an evil stepbrother she used to have, or she reminds me of some twit that broke some sort of legal contract, or maybe a loved one that Sarah was romantically involved with that walked out on her, or whatever the case is, she may then infer that experience on me because I look or sound the same as that other person. So in other words, there's an inclination in play. As a result of the fact that I may sound like someone that let her down in the past, Sarah may have a low inclination to trust people with South African accents. So I might be 10 out of 10 in reality, but because Sarah, forgive me, Sarah, has hang-ups about South African accents, it's very unlikely that we are going to get to know each other and exercise trust in between each other. So that's often where the work happens, is dealing with Sarah's issues. It's more like dealing with Dominic's issues, before we can meet each other face to face. Okay, as I said, perceptions are determined either affectionately or rationally. Affectionately has to do with impressions, emotions, and feelings, and rational is the logical demonstration of these behaviors. It's not either or, it's an interdependent dance, and it happens over time. Trust, as I've described it, those three principles, and then we can measure trust against those principles, can be measured at any scale, any bounded system where you can gather data, you can measure it, from interpersonal through to societies. There are different trust levels and inclination levels, which I can't get into, or which I won't get into now for the sake of time. But the reason I bring them up here is to convince you or to demonstrate that this thing can be quantified. Let me just step back for a moment. This is a special asterisk note for the geeks on this call. I'm speaking to you, Shabina, because you're a self-identified geek. I'm sure everyone else on the call is in part geek as well. I subscribe to something called, the closest thing to a worldview I have is something called critical realism. And critical realism acknowledges that there's an objective world out there on the one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, critical realism says the role that you and I play in creating meaning out of that world, and that creation happens through bias, perspective, less than perfect faculties, etc., plays in a very important role in accessing that world. So we do not have absolute access to the world out there, but we do have access to it, and meaningful access to it. What emerges out of that is the notion that all frameworks are broken. Just some are more useful than others. So this framework, which I'm sharing with you, which happens to be trust levels and inclination levels, there's three universal principles and this codification of it, very useful framework. But I'm not here preaching absolute science to you when I show you these levels here, but very useful nonetheless.